My sincere greetings to all of you, and very happy to have you all back again for our Facebook Live session on the 17th day of our 21 Days Habit Challenge. In our discussion yesterday, we heard about how to deal with the bad habit of anger. Now, there's many perspectives to look at why we get angry and how to deal with our anger. But yesterday we took up this one particular perspective of how anger comes out as a result of unfulfilled expectations from people. And we heard how to deal with those expectations. Number one, be realistic. Change what you can change. Number two, be prepared. Accept what you can't change. And number three, be spiritual. Rise above those things that you cannot accept, and in an extreme case scenario, maybe remove yourself from what is unacceptable. Bharti, Hare Krishna. Amanpreet ji, Hare Krishna. Sonu, Ratish Kumar and Rohit, very happy to have you this morning for our Facebook Live session. Sahil, thank you for joining us. Ria, very happy to have you. Arpita Sibam from Assam, very glad that you've joined us this morning. Nirosha, thank you for waiting for today's session. Terry Baxley, all the way from Myrtle Beach, thank you for joining us. Ashwin Kumar, very happy to have you. Aishwarya, Sparsh Agarwal, today is your birthday. We wish you a very happy birthday. Will Stifford from Cincinnati, Ohio, thank you for joining us. Parth, all the way from Winnipeg, Canada, very grateful that you're joining us. Bharti, thank you. Christian Ba, you're from Germany and you're saying it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you've woken up just to see me. Thank you so much for your effort to wake up so early in the morning at 3 o'clock to attend this Facebook Live session. I'm very delighted to be with all of you once again this morning. On our 17th date today, I thought I would take a little different angle, discuss cultivation of good habits with a slight twist, slightly differently. Now, whenever we talk about good habits, could you ever think of a good habit ever being bad? Could you ever think of doing something which is right ever being wrong? Now, what is good? What is bad? What is right? What is wrong? Many times I say our brain has two sides to it, the left and the right side. And sometimes in the left side, nothing is right, and in the right side, nothing is left. Now, just joking. Now, right and wrong, good and bad, how do we understand those things? Could right ever be wrong? Could good ever be bad? Here's an example. Now, Satya, being truthful, speaking the truth, is a good habit. It's the right thing to do. It is a fantastic virtue to practice in our lives. Now, in the modern world today, of course, when we talk of artificial intelligence, maybe in the future you would have a robo who could be a lie detecting robo, and if you go and speak a lie in front of him, he could slap you or he could reprimand you. One teenage boy, he came back late in the night, early in the morning, like 2 o'clock in the morning back home. Both his mom and dad, his parents, were waiting for him to return, and as soon as the guy came, the father said, "Here's the lie detecting robo we have, and now I'm going to take you to the lie detecting robo and question you. If you lie, the robo will slap you." The boy said, "My father's just saying something. What kind of a lie detecting robo is this?" The father took the boy, the mother also along, and the boy came in front of the lie detecting robo, and the father asked, "Where were you and what were you doing?" The boy said, "Well, I was at my friend's home and we were studying," and the lie detecting robo slapped him on the face. The boy realized, God, it works. The father said, "Where were you and what were you doing?" He said, "I was at my friend's home and we were watching this movie called Ghar Ek Mandir." The robo slapped the boy. The father said, "Which movie were you watching?" The boy said, "Sorry, Dad, but we were watching some pornography." The robo didn't slap him any longer. The father said, "When I was your age, what to speak of watching pornography? I didn't even know what pornography meant." And the robo slapped the father. And then the mother said, "What do you expect of your son? After all, whose son is he? Yours, right?" And the robo slapped her. Now, sorry about that joke. Jokes apart. But don't we all expect that people should speak truth to us? They should be truthful to us. And don't others expect of us that we should be truthful to them? As an example, in the epics from India, we have the example of a little boy whose name was Jabali, and he went to a teacher whose name was Gautam Rishi. And he asked Gautam Rishi if he could be his student and can study under him. Gautam Rishi said, I actually only accept students who are from Brahmin families, and so I would like to know what your father's name is, what your father's gotra, lineage is, so then I could accept you as a student. The boy said, sorry, I do not know what my father's name is. Gautam Rishi said, then I think you should go back to your mom and ask her who your father is. The boy went back home. His mother was actually a prostitute, and she did not know whose son he was. So when he asked his mother, who's my father and what's his name? The mother said, sorry son, even I don't know. The little boy came back to Gautam Rishi and said, I'm sorry, my mother does not know who my father is. Gautam Rishi said, you are the greatest of all Brahmanas, honest and completely truthful, and therefore I accept you as my student. And under Gautam Rishi's tutelage, this boy Jabali grew up to be a great sage and got the name Satyakam Jabali, one who was attached to speaking the truth, one who was always honest and truthful. Now yes, truthfulness is a great virtue. It's a good habit to practice. Could truthfulness, this great virtue, this good habit, this right thing to do, ever turn to be wrong or bad? Here's an example, a scenario for you to think about. Imagine that you were standing on a street late in the night, early in the morning, at about 1 o'clock, half 1 in the morning. There's nobody on the street, it's dark, and there's a girl who's running frantically, and several blocks behind the girl, a guy is chasing her. Now it really does not require rocket science to understand why he's chasing her at this time in the night or in the early morning. Of course, in some cases there may have been something else that he's chasing for, but most times, if not always, he's chasing her for the exact same reason that you thought in your heart, in your minds right now. Now imagine that as he's chasing her, and he's several blocks behind, and she's running frantically to save herself, and you're standing at one of the corners of that street. And where you're standing, there's a lane going inside, and there's many parallel lanes going inside from the main street, from the road, and you happen to be standing near one. And that girl happens to enter into the lane where you're standing, and she doesn't take note that you're standing there. Now after she goes in, after a couple of minutes, this guy comes up, and he watches that you're standing there. And he asks you if the girl has gone inside that lane. What are you going to do? Will you speak the truth? Saying yes, she's gone inside this lane? If you speak the truth that she's gone in the lane, well, the result will be she'll be molested. What will you do? Speak a lie? I don't know, maybe she's gone in some other lane. If you speak the lie, she'll be saved from being molested. Now, in this case, speaking the truth, if you have that habit of always speaking the truth, attachment to that good habit of speaking the truth will lead to that girl being molested. Attachment to this good habit of speaking the truth will produce a wrong result of her being molested. In this particular case, speaking a lie that I do not know, or probably she's gone in some other lane, would means the highest truth, because you're going to save her from being molested. In this case, the virtue of truth will take a lower place, and the virtue of compassion towards the girl and saving her from being molested will take a higher place. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, right and wrong, good and bad is not black and white. Between that black and white, there are many shades of grey. And maturity means to learn how to apply that principle, that virtue, in our example, truthfulness. Maturity means how to apply that virtue, that principle, in the particular shade of grey. It's not that the application of that principle will be black or white. It will depend on the situation, that particular shade of grey. Maturity means to see if that particular good habit or that virtue we are practicing, what is the result it would lead to? Would the result be good or bad? If speaking the truth is going to produce a bad result by that girl being molested, then that truth is bad. If speaking a lie is going to save that girl from being molested, in that scenario, the lie is the highest truth. Therefore, the second aspect of maturity is to always keep our focus on what is the result of our practicing our good habits, our practicing what is right, our practicing what is virtue. The third aspect of maturity is if we realize that our practicing something good is going to be harmful to the social large, is going to be harmful to someone, then not to be rigid. Maturity means not to be rigid, to be flexible in adjusting what we do in our personal lives in a way that it can produce the larger good. The fourth aspect of maturity is, now when we are adjusting and apparently compromising, in this case we would have spoken the truth, but in this case we've spoken the lie to save that girl from being molested. Maturity means, the fourth aspect, is to not make that exception the rule by saying, well, I spoke a lie to save her and now it's okay to speak lies and justify that I'm speaking these lies or doing any other thing for the larger good. And therefore maturity means, number one, to learn how to apply that principle depending on the shade of grey, to learn how to focus on what the result of that virtue, practice of our virtue would be, to not be rigid but to be flexible, to adjust, making sure that the result is good, and four, to not justify an exception and make it the rule and say it's okay to lie. I'm not saying lying is good. I'm not saying lying is right. I'm not saying we should be lying. I'm just saying we should be focused on what it produces. Another example. A girl is molested or raped by a guy. Now forgiveness is a great virtue. It's one of the greatest things we could practice. All our scriptures, our epics, religions, motivational speakers, gurus, spiritualists, everybody talks about forgiveness and letting go and living free. Imagine this girl who's molested by a guy. And this guy is no ordinary guy. This guy is a compulsive rapist. Everybody knows, it's in the newspapers as the most wanted. He's all over the television channels as the most wanted. And this girl is raped by the guy. Now should she practice the virtue of forgiveness or not? Well, it's a personal choice for everybody. On a personal note, she may be so exalted that she may say, okay, I'm okay to forgive this man. Yeah, fine. But the practice of that virtue, that good habit of forgiveness, if it's going to lead to a bad result, her forgiving that guy is bad. And what could the bad result be? If she forgives him and she does not allow him to be punished by the social justice, there's going to be many girls in the society who would probably be raped by this goon, would probably be raped by this brute. In this case, practice of forgiveness, the good habit of practicing forgiveness, the right thing of practicing forgiveness, living by the virtue of practicing forgiveness, could be bad if it affects the society in a wrong way. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra as well, Arjuna wanted to forgive Duryodhan, his brothers, and all of the 100 Kauravas and let go. But Lord Krishna did not allow him to let go. On a personal note, Arjun, Draupadi and all the other 5 brothers, if they would have forgiven the Kauravas, on a personal note, it's no problem. But on a social note, if they would have forgiven the Kauravas, how many more Draupadis would come into Hastinapur? How many more Draupadis would be affected the way Draupadi was affected? How many more properties would have been looted? How many more murders would have happened? How many more conspiracies would have been plotted from that palace at Hastinapur? And therefore, once again we say, the practice of this good quality of forgiveness, if it affects the social body at large in a negative way, that good habit can be bad. That attachment to good habit can be bad. Yudhishthir, the oldest brother, was so attached to being truthful, so attached to being forgiving. And Lord Krishna, through his instruction in the Bhagavad Gita and through his personal guidance to them, even inspired Yudhishthir to come above that good habit, that attachment to the good habit of being truthful. Why? Because the social body was affected, the society at large was affected. Another example for you, all of you in your personal lives. Now, being simple, being straightforward, not being duplicitous and diplomatic in our personal dealings, and being the same inside and outside is a great virtue, is a good habit. It's a fantastic quality. But imagine if because of our being straightforward, we start hurting people around us and our relationships become jeopardized by how we talk to people, then that good habit of being simple in the sense of being straightforward and the same inside and outside is bad. So then that good habit of straightforwardness needs to be balanced with sensitivity. Surely we can be speaking what we need to speak in quite a straight way actually, but if we do it in a sensitive way, it probably will save us from a lot of heartburns and from a lot of disasters in our relationships. On the other extreme, if you look at sensitivity, it's such a good habit, isn't it? It's the right thing to do, to be extremely sensitive in our speech, to be extremely sensitive in our dealings with others. But if in the name of being very sensitive, and that's our good habit, and we are attached to being sensitive, if we do not correct others, if we do not say things which are necessary to give a feedback to others and be straight, then what value is that sensitivity? So the other aspect of maturity also is to balance. Sometimes we have to balance our being straightforward by adding the element of sensitivity, being sensitively straightforward. Sometimes we have to balance our sensitivity by adding the element of straightforwardness, being sensitively straightforward. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing like right or wrong, good or bad. In general, there is. Sometimes we say, what is a good habit? Good habits are those which are not self-destructive. They're not physically, emotionally, spiritually self-destructive to us. What are good habits? Good habits are constructive, as in they add value to our lives, they add value to the lives of others. What are good habits? Good habits are doing the right thing, the good things, practicing the virtues which will never bring us a sense of guilt in our hearts. What are good habits? Good habits are those which when lived by will bring us closer to the truth, closer to God, closer to our very selves. Yes, these are good habits. But there's also another habit, which is a bad habit. And the bad habit is to be extremely attached to our good habits, despite knowing that the results of that good habit can be disastrous for others and for the society at large. Therefore, to conclude, there is many shades between right and wrong, there's many shades of grey between good and bad, and therefore what is the definition of maturity? The definition of maturity is 5 things. Number 1, learning how to apply our good habit, our virtue, the right principle in that particular shade of grey. Number 2, learning how to focus on what the result of our doing right would be. Would the result be good or bad? Number 3, if the result is bad, maturity number 3 would mean to not be excessively attached to doing things in a certain way, to our good habits. It means to be flexible, to do things that are required so that the result is good. Number 4, it means just because now we are making an exception in cases where we need to do something that's not necessarily right according to the principles of what's right, we do not make it a habit, we do not justify the means by saying, after all, it's okay, the end is going to be great. In exceptional cases, we need to practice that. And number 5, maturity means to balance, bring in that balance. For example, in straightforwardness, you may have to balance it with sensitivity. Otherwise, straightforwardness, which is a good habit, can be bad. Sensitivity, we have to balance it with straightforwardness. Otherwise, sensitivity, which is a good habit, can be bad because we may never end up telling people what actually is right. And therefore, yes, sometimes the right can be wrong, the good can be bad. But when we understand it based on this mature outlook, we will be able to actually decide what is that exact application that we need to practice in our particular situations. Once again, I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning on the 17th day of our 21 days habit challenge. Manish, thank you for joining us. Trupti, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Prasanta Chaudhary ji, Hare Krishna. Anindya, all the way from Dubai, thank you for being with us this morning. Ratiranjan, Kshenai Bodhi, Sumit Rathod, thank you very much for joining us for our Facebook Live session this morning. Sharat, thank you. Anna, all the way from Thailand, very happy to have you with us. And I look forward to seeing you, Anna, tomorrow once again at 8